If everyone can mute their phones and computers while others are talking, that will eliminate the feedback.
I had a question regarding, so the subsequent CEO, assuming there's a subsequent one, does the governor select that one also?
I believe your question was, does the governor select the CEO? We're calling them the executive director, but was that your question?
Again, I'm sorry, it's breaking up. My question is not on the first selection, but let's say 5 years from now, does the board have the authority on subsequent selections, or does that stay vested with the governor?
Marty, can you answer that?
She just left.
I can't hear you, Marty.
I believe that according to the proposed code of regulations, that the board gets to select the executive director in conjunction or with the cooperation of the governor. Does it not, Marty?
No, we put it in so that it's like I think we're planning to tease that out through policy. So the code of regulations were written so that we could continue to have these conversations as part of the board and with the governor's office.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Holly, but there's a lot of feedback.
Okay. We have IT.
Okay, can Jeffrey Simmons, can you mute your phone, please, or your computer?
I am trying to do that, but it says that it's still connecting to the share content. So maybe I can back out of that. I will turn it off. Maybe that will help.
Should I leave the room as well?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Leah.
Can you hear Marty if she talks?
I'm talking. Somebody raise their hand if they can hear me.
I can hear you, Marty.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, guys.
I've got my computer off.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like there's more than one computer in a room on this program, so you're going to get the crosstalk.
We're going to get better every single time.
We do apologize for the confusion today.
So on the code of regs, first of all, it's a draft document. It hasn't been accepted. We have that provision sort of as flagged as one that we need to have continued conversations around as, board discussions continue and our own discussions with the governor's office on this topic as well. So I think, certainly we will make sure that the code of regulations process. So I'm not as concerned about sort of the language of the draft code of regulations. Does that answer your question? I think it was Josh. I think the MOU certainly, though, it contemplates that the governor will select from 3 candidates brought forward by the board. And I believe it's his expectation that that will be the process, not just for the initial, but on an ongoing basis as well. Again, that was sort of my understanding based on conversations I've had with the governor's office.
Yeah, I guess I just think it seems like we need to make sure that the ultimate decision is the board's, and harmonize that with the MOU to the extent we can.
So, I mean, we can talk about, we have Julia and Jessica on the line as well. Marty, chime in here too. There's, when the IRS looks at our tax exemption application, they'll look at a series of factors, this being one of them. We analyzed all of those factors based on the black letter of the MOU a few months ago. I think that what we're doing now is looking at it again, because when we did look at it the first time, we hadn't yet had board appointments. We were much earlier in that process. So our facts analysis has changed a little bit. And so as Marty mentioned, we're working on that process now and hope to present to you on that soon. Jess or Julia, do you guys have anything else to add?
No, Holly, you're right. The IRS looks at multiple factors, including how closely tied the organization is to government and governmental units. So this would just be a factor reflecting that there's a tie in terms of the governor's ability to have some rights with respect to the appointment of the executive director. It would be one factor considered.
We've talked quite a bit about the RFP. Are there any questions or discussions or comments regarding the job description?
Yeah, this is Glenn Miller. I have absolutely no meeting information, no agenda, anything. Code of regulations, I have nothing. So I'm kind of coming into this meeting blind, and I can't seem to get any response or answer of why I don't have this stuff.
Glenn, I sent you a message back. Do you have access to the share file?
I have no idea,
Okay.
and I don't know. You're Catherine. I don't
Yes.
know when you sent that. I don't see anything.
So Benish set up the share file for all the board members.
Okay,
So if you
I have nothing.
Okay. Leah.
Emailed that to the whole board like a minute ago. but-
Okay, so Leah has sent it again. So Glenn, you should have it in your emails.
Let me try one more time, guys. I'll send it to everyone.
All right, we'll just wait and see. Okay, thank you.
This is Mike Royce, and that system works really well. I gotta congratulate you.
Well, Catherine, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to approve both the job description and the RFP.
Is there any further discussion?
Second.
Okay, motion made by Larry Kidd, second by Dr. Roizen. Any opposed?
I can't approve something that was basically sent out at 10 o'clock last night, and I walked into my office at 5 till 9 this morning after another meeting already this morning and approve something I have not had a real good chance to read. So I'm voting no.
Thank you, Julie.
And Glenn Miller, I'm going to vote no since the information has not been provided or I have not seen it. So, all fairness to the situation, my vote is no.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, this is Executive Shapiro. Will I echo the previous comments about not having time to have reviewed this? Can't say I'm for or against. I just haven't had time to review it.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Judy Dodge from Montgomery County, Region 8. And yeah, I'm the same as the other no votes. I haven't had a chance to really review it. We're just now getting it. So thank you.
Hi, this is Jeanette Worsbicky from Region 11. I haven't had a chance to review either. And looking through my emails, I just got the project or the position description at the start of the meeting. And I looked through all the emails that were sent last night, but I didn't, and maybe I overlooked it, but I did not see the RFP for the search form, but I may have overlooked it.
Thank you.
Leah, wasn't the RFP sent out last week?
Share file?
Yes.
Yes.
I believe so, yeah. Yeah, the job description was not, but the RFP for the search firm was placed into the share file last week.
Yeah, this is Rep. Liga. I also have received no information, so I would have a hard time voting too as well. So I would have to be a no.
It seems like we have a serious disconnect between people accessing a shared file and people feeling as though they've not gotten the information. So, I mean, I don't know if there's an opportunity to postpone this vote so that people have an opportunity to look at it. I feel like, out of deference to my colleagues, I will be abstaining from voting on this. And I hope that we can correct whatever disconnect we've got going on so that we don't continue to have this situation.
So, this is Marty.
I agree.
Are we getting feedback? I got everything shut off on my computer.
Can you guys hear Marty?
Yes.
Okay, we had hoped that when we sent out notices of the meeting and indicated that people should check the share file, that system would work. But if that's not gonna work for people, we need to, if you want us to just literally email everything and just use the share file for storage space, I mean, we can do that. We just need to, I guess we just need to resolve to do that and send stuff out instead of relying on posting for the information. Is that your preference?
This is Bill Hudson. I would prefer to have the share file. It's available at any time you want to look at it, and it is easy to access.
We won't stop using the share file. We can keep posting there, but if it is everyone's preference that everything go out by email as well, we'll just have to figure out to do that.
Well, Catherine, given there's a significant number of people that have not had the chance to review the RFP and other items, they didn't have access to the share file. Most of this is action oriented, and they won't, I would assume they wouldn't want to vote on those items either because they haven't seen them.
I would agree. And at this point, we can go through and give some information, but at this time, I don't see how we can take action on anything on this list. If no one's received the information or looked at the sheriff's list.
So let's, it might be helpful if we sort of come up with a plan for how to receive the information. It sounds like some of you like the share file and it's working well. So we'll continue to post there. I think there's our goal sort of the reason we posted there is to save your inbox. There's, frankly, there's many members of you that have signed up for working groups. And so we have numerous drafts. We had, there's just a lot of documents flying at any one time. And so we want to make sure that we keep you as organized as possible. And so, but clearly, this, I don't think that sort of what's happening today is working. So we'll continue the share drive, right? I think also in terms of the board packets, it's tough for us to, because we have so many moving parts, right? And so for this week, many of the documents weren't prepared until yesterday. The banking RFP, for example, we were still receiving responses yesterday. So we want to also take that into account. And so I think we can commit to putting together packages, but I think the question for the board is, how do we communicate in between those board packages? If you'd prefer to just do a series of emails, then we can absolutely do that. But we heard from many of you originally that, again, it would just kind of clog up your email. So I think we would at least like to leave here today knowing what the plan is for communicating moving forward.
Hi, this is Jeanette. I like the shared file and apologize for overlooking the RFP for the search firm. I think, and I understand what you're saying, that there's a lot of moving parts right now. But similar to what someone said earlier, I received the documents late last night. I had a couple early morning meetings this morning and didn't have the opportunity to review some of the documents before the meeting. So I think if we can just get a more timely copies of information so that we're prepared to act.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Miller. I feel we made the wise decision not to take any action today because no one's had enough time to review and understand there's a lot of working parts. However, something of this magnitude, what we're setting in place that will be here for hopefully for decades, we can't last minute stuff to the board for decisions. I have a serious problem with that, and I just don't think that's right. So if there's documents that aren't prepared, then that item needs to come off the agenda and be addressed at the next meeting when the proper information can be gotten out and people have time to review it. For me, if I have access to the shared drive, that's fine. I have access to nothing at this point. Email works fine. So if you want to use both, that works fine for me.
This is Tom Gregoire. I appreciate the effort to protect my inbox. I know exactly where my delete key is. So it's really easy to clean my inbox out at a moment. I have, because I'm on a subcommittee, I'm familiar with the shared drive, but perhaps others are not. I think that's a great home for documents to go back to, as one of my colleagues shared a bit ago. But perhaps it's easiest for everybody if we get an email of documents as well, and we can reference back. And maybe, and we know how hard you're working there, and as a member of a subcommittee, how fast we're trying to go. But maybe we should set a standard that documents come out 48 hours ahead if they're going to hit the agenda or something. I'll defer to our leadership on that.
John's hand is raised. Is he unmuted?
Let me say what I do whenever I get a new shared file for any entity. Sometimes I just sit with a cup of coffee and start going through it, just seeing where all the different labels are, what's behind the labels. And that's the best way of identifying. I mean, going back to it, when time is of the essence. So, I like both, but I use the share file sometimes just to orient myself.
This is Senator McCulley. I think one good approach, I like the idea of having a standard in place, not only for the board, but also for everybody who's trying to put this together. I'd be fine with 24 hours, but I think 48 hours would be fine too if the board wants to do that. But also, I think when we're putting together board packets, like actually preparing for a board meeting, I'd prefer that be an email to say, hey, this is the agenda, this is the packet. These are the documents we will be referencing. And then anything else can go in the shared drive, and that board packet and all associated documents can go in the shared drive to be referenced at any given time by any member from now until whenever they're removed or they've outlived their useful life. But at that point, I think at least it gives the members an email, it gives them notice, that way you know they got it, they've seen it, you can reference it with a stamp, and I think it on all sides.
Yeah, this is Judy Dodge, and yeah, I agree 100%. I think that, you know, if we get the agenda and what we're going to be talking about, and, you know, if you haven't gotten it in the share file, then at least we can let Leah know. So at least we have some time to make sure we have all the documents in place. I agree.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from everyone is that we would like a time period, and it looks like 48 hours seems to be sufficient, that the documents go out, that we are going to continue to use the share file, but that 48 hours prior to the next board meeting, a packet will be emailed. I think that's a quick sum up of what everybody was talking about.
Catherine, can I bring up one point, please?
Absolutely.
And I
agree.
don't have any issue with the email, but I just want to ask Marty and Holly, if we do have any confidential information in the board packet, we could be at risk sending it via email and not the shared file. You know, this is, you know, a quasi open forum, but, you know, that might be something to consider. Judy had mentioned emailing the agenda, and then that can alert everybody that what is in the shared file so they could go and access it. And if they have, you know, enough time, they can contact Leah or whoever it might be to say, look, I can't get this information. Can you help? And just a question. And Marty and Holly, if you can weigh in, if I'm concerned about the confidentiality, if we need it, we're certainly not going to have it if we send it out to 35 plus emails.
I guess there are certain kinds of subjects that I'm sure we'll identify along the way that are not things that should be open to the public. But I would hope that the board members, when they receive the information, that the general board information, we've been sending board packets out to the stakeholders. So it's part of our transparency. So I think, if when we start, looking at candidates for the job, for example, that's confidential information, but there'll be a search committee, a hiring committee expanded or something like that, will actually be looking at whatever the search firm brings to us, and that process will be confidential until we're ready to, reveal the individuals who will be forwarded on to the governor. So there'll be things that are confidential, but I think we identify those as we go along, and we let people.
They're having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. Could you hear what I was saying? Because I don't have my.
It might help if you come sit by me, honestly, because sound's coming from here. Would it help if I just sent an email every time something was uploaded to the share file, and then you could get back to me directly if you couldn't access it, and I could guide you through getting to it on the share file, as opposed to sending it straight through email?
This is Dr. Royson. That would be wonderful.
Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, that probably.
Rep. Pavliga agrees.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Miller agrees. That'd probably work the best because you could send email encrypted, but that's a whole. I don't think we want to go there. Yeah.
Okay.
So notify of being something changed on the shared drive would be wonderful.
All right,
Wonderful.
I will do that. Every time something gets uploaded, I'll send out an APB.
And Catherine, for formality reasons, I am withdrawing my motion.
Thank you, Larry. I was going to ask for that. Okay. At this point, the next on the agenda was to discuss the investment for the financial institutions and the RFP for the investment. Don, I know you were working on that. I don't know if you want to give an update. There'll be no vote on that for today. It'll be put on the agenda for next month, the next meeting as well.
Very good. And can everybody thumbs up? I unmuted, so I'm assuming that I can be heard. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And my compliments to the law firm, did a very nice job getting the RFQ out for depository, and we received 2 replies, Fifth Third and HNB, Huntington National Bank, excuse me. Both are very, very comparative. I saw the Fifth Third leaves more to be negotiated, so to speak, which is not unusual. I think especially since we don't know what our average daily balances would be. So again, we're also looking at having an outsourced chief investment officer, and I don't know if that'll be, temporary or permanent. That's also a good idea. Now, again, both those financial institutions do have investment arms. That's how they operate. So you should have received in your shared drive or in an email, either one. It does identify, and there's a spreadsheet comparison of both HBAN and Fifth Third. And that
Morning.
That ends my
Was
report.
beautiful. Yeah.
So,
Thank you, Don.
Holly, do you want to comment about what we've got, where the RFP went and responded, so that everybody understands where we sent it, where it went?
Sure. At the last meeting, this board asked for Benish to go back to, there was just stated as the 3 major banks. You may recall there was motions that were rescinded to move forward with Huntington and Key, I believe were the 2. We utilized our partners in the Ohio Bankers League. It's the Banking Trade Association. So we worked with them. They sent the information out to their members that they believed would qualify. We also sent it directly to points of contacts within those 3 banks. And then it's also our understanding that Park National Bank would have qualified for the services that we were offering. And there were perhaps 2 others as well. Again, we used OBL to help us get the word out. We, again, received the 2 responses. I think Don mentioned they're very comparable. We do have representatives from both the banks on the WebEx today, if you guys have any questions about that. Ultimately, I think it's a board decision, but, there is the other option, I suppose, is that you split the funds between the 2 banking institutions. That's another option for you to consider as well. I think, I'll just flag that the purpose of today's meeting was to approve a financial institution, understanding that, we're perhaps not in a position to take that vote today, but I do think that's important that we move forward swiftly in opening a bank account.
And I will say this, both documents are comparable. I do believe Huntington serves more counties in Ohio than Fifth Third. I was trying to go through both of their proposals which laid it out, and I believe I'm correct on that, but if corrected from another, I'm willing to say I was wrong, but I think I'm right on that.
This is Dr. Roizen. I would propose that since time is of the essence and we've really received 2 replies, the proposal would be to split the money between the 2 of them, if they would agree to that.
I think I'm going to suggest then that we have a discussion with the banks about that and think about how that would work.
The feedback I received when I asked that question, at least of one of the financial institutions, is that that would be perfectly fine, especially for, more of just the checking services that we would need initially. I think where that might be reconsidered is if we decided to utilize one of these financial institutions for investments, for investment services. I was told that, 15 million in investments versus 7 million in investments will significantly reduce your rates. So I think where that would matter is in the rates that we receive on investment services. But again, I think from a checking services perspective, it would be perfectly acceptable. But again, I think, Leah, I don't know if any of our banking partners are on the line and have raised their hand. That might be feedback that they could also share right here and now.
Yeah, this is Chris Bryant from Fifth Third Bank. I totally understand the rationale, and we do that, and we would support that. And whatever and however you guys would like to split that, we're just happy to support any way we can.
Thank you, Christopher. Okay, we've heard from Fifth Third. Is anyone from Huntington on?
Yeah, I think they're raising their hand. Catherine, Brian White is on the line.
Yeah, hi, good morning. I would just echo Chris's comments here. We're happy to support the foundation and the mission here in any way possible. So if partnering together and splitting the relationship is the best way to move forward, then we are certainly fine with that as well.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Any other questions from the board members? And do we feel confident to be able to vote on a banking institution today?
So here's my question then. Should we then have a motion to award our depository between both and then let the investment committee, I would just say this, determine which assets, which banking institutions in which roles? That's a question.
Any comments?
This is Bill Hudson, Region 19. I would agree with that. I think if we only have two financial institutions that have responded, we have two choices. We agreed, it seems, generally, that we'll split the deposits. So why don't we approve them both? We can get the account set up and get this moving on. In fact, Don, are you going to make a motion to do that?
I'll do that right now then. Thank you. So I'll move that the foundation award depository status to both Fifth Third and HBAN, Huntington Bank, and that the investment committee and the executive committee will identify the roles of the respective financial institutions.
I'll second that.
This is Rep. League. I would second that.
Okay, we have a first and a second.
Seconded that.
It was Bill Hudson.
Yeah, I seconded it.
Any opposed?
Commissioner Miller,
Thank you.
since I didn't have any information.
Any other opposed or abstaining?
I think Jane Portman.
have a
is raising-
question.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? I don't oppose this. I think this makes good sense, but I would like to just clarify, will we be just depositing these funds in equal measure to the two institutions? And if so, do we need to state that clearly in this vote?
This is Don Mason. I guess what I was looking at, Ms. Portman, was that it wouldn't be just the capital itself, the investments, but the roles of the respective financial institutions.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification. That's great.
Okay, again, last time, any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is policy, and for that, I'm going to turn it over to Holly.
Hi, everyone. So there's really not a substantial update there other than the policy committee did meet. I have received some comments from members of that working group, I should say. I think we would like to receive additional comments from members of the working group before we send it out for full review. That being said, on the share drive this afternoon, we will be posting all of the drafts of the policies so that anyone can choose to comment on them at any time moving forward. Those, I think specifically, we would like your comments and feedback on the transparency policy. Those are documents that we have not changed. They've been drafts since the first board meeting. So you receive them in the first and second board meeting packages as well. Again, it's just really my request today is for review and feedback. And we will.
How did you?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
How do you want that feedback?
However you would like to provide it. You can give me a call and discuss. You can write it in the document. You can type it over. You can do track changes, whatever you would like to do. We'll make it easy.
Thank you.
And I think, depending on sort of the level of feedback and the substance of the feedback that we receive, it's our goal to put these policies in front of you with, of course, 48, although we'll plan to give you more notice so that there's a lot of documents there before the next board meeting. But again, we really would like to see substantive feedback from the board members in order to do that. Marty or Jess, do you have any comments there?
I don't. I think, we've done a fair amount of work on those policies. And Jessica's been working on a couple of them that you may not have seen yet. There's an excess benefit policy that has to do with compensation issues. And there's an investment policy that's being worked on. So as they get done, they'll go in the share file for comment so that and we don't have to adopt all of these policies at the same time in the same meeting. The ones that have been out there for a while, I think we need to get final feedback on it and get those adopted. And the other ones will, come along behind them.
Right. The executive compensation and access benefit, those should all have been uploaded to share file. The investment policy, Marty, that's something that the investment advisor that the foundation ultimately picks will help guide that process, since that will incorporate asset allocations, et cetera. So that one, I think, will be coming in the future. I think one policy that's maybe outstanding right now that we're working on is just a role of the board type of policy, which will be pretty short and sweet. So most of the policies have been shared already for review.
The one that hasn't is the inclusion. Another one that hasn't is the inclusion policy. So I'll flag that for you guys as well. Maybe if we could just go back under the investment committee, and Jess, feel free to chime in here too, Dawn as well. On the position of outsourced chief investment officer, that was one of the items on the agenda for today's meeting, was to approve an RFP for an investment manager / CIO function, chief investment officer function. Jess and I we've had a lot of conversations and have been doing a lot of research around what this role looks like. So it's an individual that they're not directly connected with the investment management firm, but they serve as a fiduciary to the board, and they help guide the investment strategy, the hiring of the investment manager, perhaps staffing the investment committee. And so we are working on an RFP that we'll hope to share with you soon. But I think we wanted to get a little bit of feedback from you. Jess, do you want to maybe chime in here?
Yeah, I think the issue is what are we going to need in terms of assistance with respect to investments for the foundation, given that we're building up the infrastructure. Obviously, some foundations have staff members that work on their investments. They themselves go out and find the investment managers, work on the asset allocation, et cetera. Obviously, we don't have that kind of staff yet. So it's finding the right mix of outside help to assist with the investment policy or asset allocations, picking and reviewing investment advisors, reviewing performance on an annual, quarterly basis. What types of services are we going to require? That remains to be seen. And that's what we're trying to compile a good list of things that we think you would likely need help on, and then finding the right firm or individual to provide those to the foundation and serve in a fiduciary role so that that firm or individual has the best interest of the organization in doing all that type of work. There's many firms that provide such services. It's become very popular, and it really just depends on how much assistance the foundation's going to need with their investment strategy.
This is Don Mason. I think that's a very solid idea for a couple of reasons. One is we're just now establishing the possibility that we'll have longevity to the foundation. I know up until a month ago, I thought really the role of the foundation was be more of a temporary in nature, get the money in, get the money out into programs. But then when we started discussing part of the role of the CEO, executive director, would be fundraising, that's when I started to realize, okay, so this might be a board of more permanence. So right now, I would say our investments would be, for example, short-term and intermediate term, because you want to get the money moved to, again, recovery and services. But going back to the long-term position of the foundation, if we can attract contributions, clearly those would have a long-term perspective. So I could see ourselves transitioning from short-term, intermediate-term investments to having the third tier, which is long-term investments. So I think it's a good idea up until maybe one day we will have our own senior vice president for finance or something like that who can handle that role. But until then, I really think it's a good idea to have an outsourced chief investment officer.
This is Tom Gregoire. I'd like to comment briefly. I agree with Don's recommendation about a senior vice provost officer. I wanted to just observe something we've at least briefly discussed in the past is the longevity of this endeavor. There are at least some of us who believe, because that has implications for investment. There are some of us who believe that an appropriate or a best strategy, hence the fundraising also, is to endow a lot of these funds and invest the returns in the communities. I believe we could actually be harmful if we moved a lot of money out quickly that then ended. I think a strategy, and I don't want to take us down a rabbit path on that if we need to have a discussion in a future meeting, but a strategy that is more longer term and supports the state and the programs of the state over a longer period of time, I think is well worth discussing.
This is Marty. I'm taking some notes here, and I think at some point we should set aside a board meeting solely for that discussion of the role of the foundation going forward. I think you're going to have some kind of a grants making process. That's another area we haven't even begun to talk with you about. We've been working on that, the strategies for grant applications and grant procedures to put in front of you. And certainly the MOU requires that we set up some sort of appeal process. So that's a whole other pile of work that we need start, but I think we need to have that general discussion focused on the role of the foundation, because that will impact, what you do now and what you do later. So we'll work with the officers to schedule that as a meeting.
Larry, do you have any thoughts about sort of how, if we were to, is this something that you would hire a search firm for? How do you envision this, given your expertise?
I do believe bringing somebody in to, do the evaluations and oversee the process is a good idea. I don't know if you need an RFP for that necessarily, or a firm. Don, you probably know some folks, don't you, that
Well, again, I think that now that we're looking at having Fifth Third and Huntington on board, might consult with them also, but I'm used to working with those kind of firms that work with university investments, which again are normally long-term. But I do think we can find, and I'll talk with the law firm, a person who'd be fiduciary to us until, and again, I'm supposing if we're of a long-term nature, some point we'll have a senior vice president, somebody who's over, internal audits and things of that nature, and can handle something of this importance.
Jessica, do you want to comment on the conversations you've been having?
Yeah, I've had conversations internally with some of our securities and investment lawyers, and externally with other foundations in terms of suggestions. A lot of foundations have been up and running for a long time, and so they have an established staff or relationships with investment firms. So they're in a little bit of a different position. They have had some very interesting comments. So I think, as Marty mentioned, a next step would be for us as lawyers to talk to the investment working group, and then have a separate board meeting to talk about what exactly we're looking for in terms of an investment advisor, consultant, outside chief investment officer, whatever we're ultimately going to decide is the best for the foundation.
So we'll continue, Jess and I and the team will continue to have those conversations and provide feedback, working through the investment working group. And I think there's, no action to be taken here. It was just simply an update for you guys. Thank you for the feedback today.
Thank you, Holly. Okay, Code of Regulations.
That's, again, I thank you so much to the members that have provided feedback and input. That's been very helpful. Many of you were in the room when the settlement was negotiated. And so I think the input and feedback that you're providing relative to those conversations has been tremendously helpful for us. I would just ask that others that have not yet taken a look at the Code of Regulations and please do and provide input. Again, happy to receive those comments, however is easiest for you. Feel free to just give me a call and talk through it if that's something that you would prefer. Again, I think it's our goal to adopt the Code of Regulations at the next board meeting. That draft has been on the share file. It's been in your first and second board packages as well for many weeks at this point. But we want to make sure that you have enough time to review those changes. We'll make sure that we provide a red line as well so that you can see the changes that we're proposing as a result of the feedback we received from you. That's all.
So Holly, given that we want to actually get this done at the next board meeting, do we want to set a deadline for feedback?
Well, the deadline has passed, and I did receive.
No, I mean,
comment.
we've said we want to have it adopted at the next meeting. So if there's additional feedback, we need to set a time frame for getting that so we can pull this together and get it out in time. That's my point. So do we want to say there's another week for feedback?
Sure, I will. I think at some point we will have to close it off. And so, I want to be responsive to everybody's timeline. It is a large and important document. So I would appreciate receiving your feedback. Let's just say I'll give you guys 2 weekends. So by the 25th, and we'll plan to sort of close it off by then so that I have sufficient time to engage in the drafting process. Thanks.
Thank you, Holly. All right, any other comments on the Code of Regulations?
Yeah, this is Bill Hudson. Holly or Marty, I had a conversation about the degree to which the Code of Regulations needed to correlate with the MOU. Could you speak to that?
I mean, when you say you had a conversation, were you looking at any specific items?
Well, the MOU contained a lot of details, in fact, around even the selection of an executive director that is not necessarily detailed in great detail in the Code of Regulations. The Code of Regulations is very general, I would say. And can you speak to the degree to which the two need to actually correlate to one another?
I mean, I think that's certainly up to, in some sense, the parties to the MOU. We're trying to draft a code that kind of walks the line between the MOU and what is the best practice for a not-for-profit tax-exempt entity, and it is a private entity. So we have been purposely more general on certain items in the Code of Regulations. We certainly, but for example, on the quorum, we have taken that directly out of the MOU. I mean, that's an important item, is what constitutes quorum. It's also a difficult item for the way it is structured, but that's in the code. We've been a little looser on the executive director language. But we may, if it's the board's desire that we pull that language, put all the language that's in the MOU in, we can certainly do that. We tried to give you some more room to work, and we've tried to make the code more consistent with what we see with other nonprofit organizations. And sometimes the MOU is just not workable. And those are dilemmas. But the parties to the MOU can weigh in and say, no, you need to do it this way, and then we'll have to do it that way. Does that
Marty?
make any kind of sense?
Marty? Can you hear me?
Yeah, speak a little louder.
Okay. Perhaps for now we should reflect what the MOU states. We can always change the Code of Regulations later if we're successful. But I would agree they should probably be consistent.
So I think there's some areas, for example, and for the Code of Regulations working group that we formed, you've already seen this document, but I went through and identified the areas in which the code we propose, that's the draft Code of Regulations, either differs, but it's really just clarifies the MOU in most instances. One example is the MOU proposes to allow delegates. As we've discussed in these meetings, that goes against common law and Chapter 1702. So, you cannot delegate a fiduciary duty of a nonprofit corporation. So that's one area that we are proposing is clarified in the Code of Regulations. And there's a couple of areas like that. In the draft code that you have received, I highlight to draw to your attention those areas so that you can pay specific attention to them. And again, I've received feedback from some of you as to those points, but not all. I think it's important to provide that feedback. So Larry, your point is taken. If you feel strongly that we should clearly state the MOU, it's our job to let you know where there are areas that we think are not compliant with the law, or at least from nonprofit and tax law perspective. It's ultimately the choice of the board to adopt the Code of Regulations. So we will make sure that it reflects the feedback and intention of certainly the MOU and then of this board as well.
Holly, I was speaking specifically to the governor's choice.
Okay.
And obviously that's not necessarily a legal matter. It's more of our ability to obtain the 501(c), but and it's something that clearly most, if not all of us, agree that it isn't the most optimal situation, but it is what it is for now. And again, we can change the code later, but if there's something clearly that is not legal, then we should reflect what's legal.
To the point of the executive director, the way we had worded it is that the executive director will be selected by the board in consultation with the governor. We did that specifically so that it would sort of leave some interpretation to the process. Our goal then was to build that out a little bit more through a policy document so that it would give us some room to have these conversations. But, I think that's a point well taken, that we could just certainly add in exactly what's in the MOU. And as you mentioned, the Code of Regulations can be changed. Don?
Thank you. And I thought the law firm did a remarkable job drafting that provision, because to me, it helps cut that fine line between what the IRS would probably approve, which is what you have drafted, and the dangers of making it just absolutely clear that the governor in his own capacity appoints. So I like the way you worded it. I think the IRS would approve it. I also appreciate a lot of the other, as you had it in yellow, some of the other clarifications you have made in terms of the ethics policy. And I do want to make sure on the conflicts of interest, I do want to make sure that the people here don't feel that they have to either give up their work or give up their board, though, to make sure that they still participate. So I want the conflict to be something, I liken this to Ohio Public Works Commission. You are allowed to vote on things in your region, even though you know who the parties are, because again, we want to get the money moved out. So I do think we have to look at the conflicts of interest and with the eye towards making sure the money gets moved to where it needs to be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that was raised by other board members, Don. Thanks.
Okay, any other?
Thank you for addressing that, Marty. I appreciate it.
It's just a hard line we're walking. I moved so you all could hear me better. So I'm over here next to Leah.
The one other thing I'll just remind everyone, and Don mentioned this just briefly, is that the Code of Regulations is a document that's submitted as part of our 501c3 tax exemption application. So that's why, I think we're mindful of some specific language that we have to submit, and processes too.
Great. Thank you, Holly. All right, moving along. We have some logos. Holly, are you going to be able to share the screen so that they can see
I should be able to. Let me see.
Okay, so we have 3 logos that have been presented to us by the marketing firm that we hired.
Can you guys see? Let me see. Can you see
your PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, it's up
Yes.
as part of your
It's
screen and not
Looks
just
good.
PowerPoint.
I'm sorry, Marty.
It's your whole page is up there, so if you can click to slides only or whatever it is to
Yeah.
just PowerPoint, I think it'll be a little bigger.
Does that work?
There you go. You got it.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think these are the intended board actions today: to approve a logo, approve a domain, and approve foundation email accounts. Of course, that's all at the discretion of the board. So we'll kind of move through those as we go along. A digital update here. So as you know, at the last board meeting, you voted to select Trust Digital as a vendor for our phase 1 services. So our contract has been received and is under review at this time. As a note, they have agreed to commence services in advance of signing that contract and also of us having payment prepared, because before just moments ago, we didn't have a bank account. So thank you to Trust Digital, but we're working our way through that process. The work that's underway, they've designed a series of logos for us that I'll share with you momentarily that are also they're also on the share drive. We have secured numerous domains, so you'll see those just momentarily. You may recall at the last board meeting, you authorized a fee of an expense of $500 to purchase competitor domains. So that's been done. And we are in the process of building a high quality modern website. I'm in the process now of drafting some of the copy around the About Us page, and I will be soliciting your feedback and input there. Just a note, I can't see if somebody raises your hand, and I don't have access to the chat function. So just if you have a question, please just chime in and stop me. And then we are actively working to build our stakeholder list. We have shared, sorry, Leah, but Leah's email address far and wide across numerous publications to try to make sure that we're getting the word out about the work of the foundation and everything that we're doing and hope to do. So these are the logo options. Leah should have sent out, I think, in the chat function, a Survey Monkey that will allow us to take that vote right now, if you so choose. I think we would need a motion to do that. There can be some discussion as to whether these are options that you like. The other option is something else that we don't see here that would provide we would be able to provide additional feedback to Trust, and they could kind of go back to the drawing board or make some edits. So I'll pause there and allow for discussion.
I like the bottom logo, the one with the shape of the outline of Ohio. I think that visual is nice. I like the typeface. I think the middle one is confusing. I don't like the circles around the 2 different parts of Ohio. And the one in the top is okay, but I think the bottom one looks terrific. This is Jane Portman speaking.
Thank you, Jane. So Leah did put in the chat box a link for everyone to vote if they're comfortable with that. Are there any other comments regarding the logos?
I'm sort of, I understand where Jane comes from. I do like the word foundation being prominent in the One Ohio Foundation, and that goes back to one of the possible domain names having foundation for consistency. So I think you want to consistently brand. So One Ohio Foundation is a consistent brand.
The other option is if per Jane's comments, you like option number 3, but you wanted to incorporate the word foundation into that design. If that's the pleasure of the board, I'm not quite sure. Yeah, we could add it just at the bottom there. So that's just something to consider.
This is
Well, I
Executive
would
Shapiro.
agree with that. I like what Jane spoke to about the outline of Ohio, and I would love to see the word foundation in there too. Thank you.
Yes, this is Executive Shapiro. I would agree with that. I like number 3 and add the addition of foundation underneath that as well.
Hi, this is Jeanette Worsbicky from Region 11. I also like option 3, but with the foundation added. So it might be something that you want to consider, like the typeface from option 1, the One Ohio Foundation, and then put that, in conjunction with option 3.
Denise Driehaus from District 2, I agree with that.
Okay, so, I think, Leah, do we have the vote? Like, if it's primarily number 3, and then, we can decide to go back and get that, that changed by Trust Digital. I think.
Responses to the survey, and 71% prefer the third option. 28% are preferring the second option.
Okay. So if somebody, I think it would be appropriate to make a motion to accept the third with the caveat of adding foundation. But again, that's, I'll leave it to the board members to decide.
So is there anyone who would like to make that motion?
I'd like to make the motion. Greta Mayer, Region 14. And Julie Heyman would like to second.
Okay. We have a first and second. And is there any other discussion? Okay. Any opposed?
I have a discussion. Was the motion to include the word foundation or to leave it the way it is?
To include foundation. Any other questions? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
Great.
All right, Holly, you want to move on to the website domain?
Yes. Okay, so you'll see here, can everyone see my screen still?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So you'll see here on the left, these are the domain names that we have purchased. These are the preferred domains that we would recommend, we being the Benish team in conjunction with our partners at Trust Digital, that you consider. You'll see 10h.org and oneohiofoundation.com. So there was a discussion at the last meeting around wanting a .org. From a tax exemption and a public charity perspective, we felt like that was important. However, most of the .org domain names that we would contemplate have already been taken. That being One Ohio Foundation, One Ohio Recovery Foundation, 10H Foundation, those have all been taken. Or no, sorry, 10H foundation.org is actually, here you'll see that on the left. Oops, sorry. So that perhaps is another option for you to consider, given the desire to add foundation into the verbiage of the last one. The inclusion of the number 1 was advised against because it has a higher likelihood of getting stuck in the spam mail. So I would open it up for discussion. Again, you have the option of any on the left, as well as, these are the two that we picked out as preferred, but it's up to the board to decide.
This is Don Mason. Since we have just adopted One Ohio Foundation on the logo, I would strongly encourage under column 2, number 2, approve One Ohio Foundation.com. I realize it doesn't say .org. At least this would be consistent with our logo.
Hi, it's Jane Portman, and I agree with Dawn. I like the consistency of One Ohio Foundation, and I'm not concerned about the .com.
Trust Digital did do a little bit of research around the .org versus the .com. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. And their response was that they looked up, and most charities do have a .org. It's not a requirement. I think it's more optics for this board to consider.
Understood. And I don't object to the org. I just like having the consistency of the One Ohio Foundation. But if the group's preference is to go with .org, I'm okay with that too.
Well, there's no requirement, as I understand it, Dr. Roizen, sorry, we could purchase both and have the .com go to the .org. I think we do have, and the .com go to the .org. So we have one, the .org, but if people put in .com, it would go to the .org.
Yes, we already have purchased all of these, and I believe once we select one, they'll all route to ours. There was something else to consider is the length of the domain, an email that says holly@1oh.org versus holly@oneohiofoundation.com. I don't think it matters too much, but that's another consideration. So I think we do have a doodle poll set up. If that's something that you would like to consider, we can also entertain a motion, or this is something that you can defer to another time. I'll leave it to the board to decide.
I'll say on the Survey Monkey, we've got 14 respondents, 84% prefer oneohiofoundation.com, 15% prefer 1oh.org, but we did not propose the other options.
I make a motion to approve number 2, oneohiofoundation.com. This is Mircea from Region 17.
Second the motion, Don Mason.
Okay, we have a first, a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, motion carries.
Great.
Thank
Okay.
you, Holly.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Moving along, there has been several requests of board members to consider adopting foundation email accounts. We'll, of course, have to do that for staff members. We will need it also for, whether it's an info or contact us at now oneohiofoundation.com. We'll have to include those on the website. Here you can see some cost estimates. This was if we wanted to choose the option of purchasing 35 email accounts, that would include some initial staff members plus the 29 board member accounts. This is the price here. We could also just approve, 5 or so email accounts just to get things up and running. But we were asked to provide a cost estimate for that for board members as something that you may like to consider. So here it is, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about the option here.
Holly, is it necessary for each of us to have our own individual email accounts?
I do not think it's necessary at all. It was requested by a number of individuals as a means to keep things clean, as you mentioned. As we've kind of discussed today, it's there's a lot of emails flowing, and we want to make sure that we keep everything on track. It could be an optional purchase where you opt in, and we could, spend a lesser amount for those that choose to opt in. That's another option, because it does go up in price the more that you purchase. Marty, do you have any feedback there?
Not anything, excuse me, different from what you've already said. It was offered up as something that members might want, because it would be clear that what was coming to you was foundation-related business. So we priced it out as a convenience, but it's really up to you. I think the important thing is, now that you've adopted a URL, we can get a website up and running where we can, post for the public and certainly for board members, and we can begin, our marketing strategy to let the world know what's going on. So email thing is for your convenience.
I personally, as the board chair, would appreciate an email account that's tied directly to the foundation, just because I am inundated with all of the working groups, all of the emails from Benish, all of Leah's emails, in addition to the emails that I receive from other board members. So for me, I would like a place to where it all just stays right together and very clean, and very easily for me to find emails and correspondence that is being sent to me.
Does that it requires another email, meaning you've got to open another browser and have another email account, essentially? Is that correct?
So you can set up a forwarding if you wanted to. There's certainly a way to do that so that it forwards into your existing email account. I think there was some potential concern by board members of providing their personal, contact information as well. We do want to make sure that, this board is accessible to the public, and that, we have a way to communicate. And so, but there was a concern that, some individuals would have to provide their personal or work contact information.
I might say, like my iPhone, I have 7 email accounts on it, so your iPhones can carry more than 2 or 3.
And the same is true if you have, say, a personal email account. You can have multiple accounts set up on the same platform, so you'll be able to switch back and forth between the two. You're also able to, sorry, I just got a text from Kevin at Trust Digital. You're also able to set them up in Outlook if you use the Microsoft Office suites as well. So you could have it set up as a separate account.
I'll volunteer to help if anyone has any specific questions on forwarding it or setting it up. I'm pretty tech savvy, so if you have a specific problem with your email and it's the One Ohio email and you want it forwarded to your other email, I can probably help you with that.
And I think that's something that I'm sure Trust would be willing to help us with as well.
This is Senator McCauley. I personally would not use this email, and so I think there's probably a number of board members who would want it. There are a number of board members who wouldn't use it and would just prefer that they keep their existing email because they already have 5 email accounts they monitor on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And so I would say what we should do is allow for the establishment of 5 email accounts on a rolling basis that would be for actual staff members or whatever the case may be, and then allow for the expenditure to be made for any board members on a case-by-case basis who would like to opt in and have an email address.
I'll second that.
I'll make that motion officially, and then you can consider the second, I guess.
Thank you,
I
Senator.
will second it officially.
Thank you,
Officially
Dr.
second it.
Rose. So we have a first and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay, great. We'll reach out and Leah, if you can just set up a doodle poll to see who would like to acquire an email address, we'll get that going. Okay, great.
Thank you.
So we have, as I mentioned, phase 1 up and running. I also just want to bring to your attention that a potential phase 2 services in the digital space might include the following. When we approved the initial expenditure of the website, that is that's the first step. There's certainly a lot more that I think we could be doing and should be doing. Here's, sort of a potential list of items that we might consider. I would be happy to invite Kevin from Trust Digital to come and speak at one of our next board meetings. There's no action on the table unless you choose to today. We don't have any of this priced out yet, but it's just something that I wanted the board to kind of think about as we move forward, especially in the interim before we hire someone. So maybe if you'd like to kind of continue that conversation at the next board meeting, this will be in your board packet so you can contemplate what our services will look like moving into the future. And then Catherine, maybe you and I can discuss afterwards. Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to suggest putting this into the board packet for next time, putting it back on the agenda, letting people kind of digest it. You and I can talk afterwards, and but I'd like to see it on the agenda at our next meeting.
You got it. Okay. So at the last board meeting, there was a number of you that raised the concept of, how do we get ahead of our messaging? What does a potential communications and PR strategy look like? So since our last board meeting, I've had numerous conversations with very reputable PR and communications firms in town, and I just wanted to share some feedback with you. So I think the consensus is that they would advise immediate action to make sure that we're introducing the foundation, launching the foundation in the best way possible, combating any potential negative messaging, and then also make sure that the foundation is just set up for success moving forward. The feedback I received is that an RFP is perhaps, as Larry said, for some of the hiring stuff, it may slow down the process. If we want to just, choose someone quickly, that's, I think that we probably have, well, I can tell you we've already received 3 formal proposals for these services. So you have 3 waiting now, but I'm sure we could very easily solicit some great candidates as well. A short-term contract, if we wanted to do something, say now through the end of the year, would be perfectly acceptable. You have many firms that would be ready, willing, and able to provide those services on a short-term basis. And then, if it was the executive director that decides to hire a communications person and bring that service in-house or pursue a phase 2 strategy, that could be a decision made later. Again, this is just sort of based on the feedback of conversations that I've had. Fees are in the range of about $5,000 to $10,000 per month. I assume that could be negotiable based on the level of services and firm you provide. This is what I heard from professionals in the industry, that a phase 1, as I mentioned, should really focus on launch, stakeholder engagement, and earned media strategy. They feel that formulating and telling our story is very critical, that, we haven't received funds yet, but we're undertaking a lot of very substantial efforts, positive efforts that will ensure the future success of this work, of our foundation, and that we can save lives. And that communicating the role of the foundation versus the role of the regions versus the role of our stakeholders in the state, that's a very important process, part of the initial process. I mentioned to you already that 3 proposals have been received, so I'm happy to share those with you on the drive if that's something you would like to consider. So here, I just want to put forward a discussion. How would you like to proceed? Here's a few options that you might contemplate. You could form a working group to select a firm. You could do a formal RFP process, but again, I think that would require a working group. You could form a working group of board members to just do that sort of some initial phase 1 work instead of hiring it out. You could do nothing and wait until an executive director is on board, or you could hire for an in-house communications person right now. There's some other options as well, but those are some that I've contemplated. So I'll just be quiet now, happy to answer any questions and let you guys discuss.
Holly, this is Tom Gregoire.
Holly,
Lots of options.
Go ahead.
I would not want to take action that ties a future director's hands, like hiring an in-house or making a long-term commitment, and I would not want to wait until we have a director. So I think one of the options you discussed is and I'm probably naming it incorrectly, is an interim plan where we get out and do this now and then leave the director to make her or his final decision on how they would go forward later.
Holly, I would agree with Tom, and I think we need to get in front of this as quickly as possible in case something does happen. That way we've already established a relationship, and, waiting until the ED's on board, I mean, it could be 6 months before we realistically have somebody. And having somebody in-house, I, again, agree with Tom. Let's let the executive director make that decision. But it's 6 months sounds like a good and reasonable time period, and will allow to put some strategy in place. And if there's any crisis management needed, they'll be ready to go.
This is Don Mason. Let me ask this. The digital media firm we used to help us up to this date, do they have anybody in-house or any contractor they work with? That way you would have this nice sort of blend between what we're doing with them now, and they could help manage that process for us?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the 3 proposals that we have received came through as part of Trust Digital. At the last board meeting, you did ask me whether or not they can do these services. Trust Digital themselves as an entity would not, but they work on, a lot of these strategies directly with partners in the industry, and they would be willing to submit the proposal under trust.
I mean, I like that because that way they sort of dovetail together. Who's the firm that they work with, Holly?
So Convista is Connie Luck is the lead PR individual, but they have a number of other individuals as well.
Okay. To me, that sounds like a good short-term approach, so that we're not tied into, number one, we're not hiring a person away from somebody else and then subsequently let them go. And actually the feet are already on the ground with our digital media.
Any other comments?
This is Senator McCulley. Yeah, this is Senator McCulley. The approach, one of my concerns last time around was, if Trust Digital could do it, that's fine, but we needed to figure out what their capabilities and expertise was. And it appears that, there's been that discussion, and they've acknowledged that while it's not in their wheelhouse, there is company that they work closely with that could handle these types of issues on an ongoing basis in the short term. And I do think we're guaranteed to have some sort of collaboration between the two if it's under Trust Digital's contract. And so I would be comfortable moving forward, given the impetus of having this done and having it done quickly. I would be comfortable moving forward with this now, especially given the fact that the company that they're going to be subcontracting with, knowing Connie Luck personally and knowing her background and her experience in and out of government, particularly dealing with some of these issues in the governor's office before in a previous role that she had, I would be comfortable moving forward now and granting the somebody, I don't know who, the ability to negotiate this contract.
If that's a motion, I'm willing to second, working through our digital provider and their contract with Connie Luck's firm, whatever that name was.
I will, the Senator McCulley again, I will officially make that motion.
And I'll second it.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Don. We have a first and we have a second. Any further discussion?
This is Bill Hudson. There's just one question. How are we going to pay for it? And will they delay a fee until we actually have cash in the bank?
So I can only.
And I think.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I'd like to ask that the motion be modified to put a cost limit on it.
So Trust has, as you know, they've commenced work without us having payment in the bank. With the approval of the bank account today, I think we will likely have funds in the bank in the next, let's say, 2 weeks or so. I don't know. Well, I shouldn't say that because it may take us that long to even just get the bank up and running. But once we have the bank account finalized, I think we can receive funds within 2 weeks. That's certainly something that I can go back to. I wouldn't expect it's a problem. Of the 3 firms that I spoke to, they certainly offered to begin work immediately. So I wouldn't expect that would be a concern.
I would modify the motion then, per the last request, to include an additional expenditure to Trust Digital of up to, we'll say, $10,000 a month. Is that what you said their proposal was, Holly?
So I think it was, but like I said, I received 3 proposals and I didn't do a price comparison of the 3 because I didn't know that we were sort of at that point. But I think that I think they were, and maybe they didn't provide a price, but I can't remember. Maybe it was 10,000. I'm sorry. I can go back and look. But I think you can certainly negotiate something that's up to 10,000. I don't think that you need to expend more than that.
Okay. Well, then I will modify my motion to say that I move that we engage Trust Digital, or at least amend the contract with Trust Digital to reflect a provision of these services through a subcontractor with an additional fee paid on Trust Digital's contract of up to $10,000 a month for subcontracting with Convista, the Convista PR group.
I'll second that, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Don. Any further discussion?
Yes, this is Executive Shapiro. I just want to ask the question through Trust Digital. This is $120,000 that they're going to subcontract. What was the initial contract with them?
I believe it was just for $3,000. It was a flat fee to set up.
Is this all? Let me ask the question a different way. Is this the only contract we will have with Trust Digital, which is a subcon to somebody else, right?
Yes, I believe because we haven't even signed the phase 1 website contract. I think we could very easily amend it to include this provision. The website set up the phase one, that was a one-time fee. It was not an ongoing monthly
Gotcha.
expenditure.
Okay, thank you. I also, $120,000 a year is a significant amount of money. So I would suggest that in that we have some milestones so we understand what the deliverables are and what we're actually paying for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
This is Senator McCullough. This is Senator McCullough, and I would agree with the last comment. $120,000. Well, let's make this clear. This is on an ongoing basis, and so to the comments that have been made earlier, this is going to be subject to termination at any given time, I suppose, subject to the terms of whatever's negotiated. But the understanding being, when an executive director is hired, an executive director can decide whether to continue this relationship, whether to formalize it in a greater context, whether to put out an RFP, or whether to hire somebody in-house. And so I wouldn't necessarily say it's going to be $120,000. I do believe it's going to be on a monthly retainer, is my understanding. But with all that being said, I do reiterate that we can't really wait around too long, because we're already having to deal with some actions of the press that need some professional attention in the very near term.
Thank you, Senator.
Catherine, this is Marty. I'm wondering if there are any volunteers who want to, be part of our negotiations or look at what the proposals are as we negotiate this contract. We got any expertise that could be offered up here?
I'm certainly not an expert, but always willing to help.
To help with that. This is Dr. Royce, and I'd be willing to help.
It's Tom Gregoire. I'd be willing to help, but as soon as I get unconfused, I think there's a motion on the floor.
There is.
And to accept something, and we're also looking at somebody else's proposals. Can I have some clarification?
So the motion was actually to go with Trust Digital and have them use Connie Luck and go forward with that with up to a limit to include up to $10,000 a month. That is the current motion that's on the floor.
What is the function of creating a small group to look at proposals that were?
I don't know. I'd like to get through the motion and then go back to Marty's question to the group to put a work group together. So if we could get through the motion.
I apologize, Catherine. Before I can vote, I'm just confused. Given what Marty said, go ahead, Marty.
My suggestion was we'll be, if you approve this motion, we'll be negotiating a contract with Trust Digital that will involve these services from Luck. And I wondered if there were people with some expertise who wanted to assist us in those negotiations.
Thank you. That I'm less confused than I was a few minutes ago.
Any other discussion? Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries.
Okay. So we have 1 minute left, and I'll turn it over to Marty for a quick D&O insurance update.
We have gotten some additional feedback from Rick Bersnack, and he has found an insurer who's willing to write D&O insurance. I just got his message yesterday, and I shared it with Catherine. I'll share it with the officers to take a look at it so we can come back to you with a recommendation. Would cover you now, but as I understand what he said, it would be a conditional coverage based on it ultimately getting the exemption status. He's been unable to find a company, let me just put it this way, what he considers a reputable company to ensure, unequivocally without the exemption being approved. That's what I know at this point. I haven't, like I said, I got his follow-up proposal, his follow-up information yesterday, and I need to talk to him about it, talk to the officers about it. There are other products, including the employment liability, that we'll probably want to get in place as soon as we have an employee, and some other coverages that we can get. D&O insurance is just problematic until we have an exemption decision
Marty,
from the IRS.
Marty, I had the opportunity to talk to our attorney firm regarding this, and they have some folks that they think would cover. So would you like me to forward that information?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
Marty.
That's the update, and we'll have further conversation about it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Larry, for forwarding that information to Marty.
Certainly.
We are to our last item for open discussion from any of the board members. Is there any comments?
Catherine, I do have a comment. Clearly, with all the committees, all the startup, everything we're doing, and Leah probably would attest to this, we're probably overloading her. And I would suggest that we look at getting an administrative assistant on a temporary basis to help assist with this, all this work. And again, as a temporary individual, we could let them go anytime as soon as we hire an ED, or if we find that it's not what we need, the cost would be relatively minimal. But there are an awful lot of information going back and forth, and I think, bringing somebody on could be extremely helpful.
Do you want to, do we want to look at, are we looking at hiring somebody or a firm that can provide that assistance?
Yeah, I would suggest, just a firm that would provide an individual. We would not be the employer record. We don't have to worry about the filings. We don't have to worry about the payroll, other than submitting hours. Just something, help us through this gap as we're doing some of the startup.
Okay, so I'm sure we would probably need to look at what firms are available out there. Maybe we can have something at the next board meeting.
I've taken the liberty and gotten some quotes.
Oh, excellent.
I'd love to share that with you or the group, or however you want to.
I think it should go to the group, and this way we can have that discussion at the next board meeting.
Sure.
And if we already have information, they can review that and hopefully be ready to vote.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right. Anything else?
Catherine, we did talk about approving the minutes at the end of the meeting. And
Yes.
I wanted to make one correction. It's got Commissioner Dodge listed as being absent. I do believe she was at the meeting.
Okay. Thank you. Are there did everyone have a chance to look at the minutes?
I think because they were posted late, I see some individuals shaking their heads. So
Okay.
I would maybe defer that to the next meeting since it was.
Yes, and we're going to have to approve multiple minutes at the next meeting. So thank you, Julie, for the correction. We'll get that made. And then we will get the minutes out prior to the board meeting in the board packet. And we will get those to be voted on. So is there anything else?
I do have a question. This is Mircea from Region 17. I know some of the regions continue to meet. and we are kind of working on a application for services for our region. Is that something that we have a time frame, maybe when us as a foundation are looking at that, when we are ready to maybe accept proposals or applications?
I can give some context. We are working on the grant making policy. I think that's going to be. We want to do that right. We want to, of course, adhere to the MOU, but we want to make sure that we're soliciting input and feedback from the regions and from stakeholders. And so we've started that process, but we don't have even a draft policy, and we have not yet formed a committee. I think on the agenda at the next board meeting should be to establish the formal committees. Right now, we're operating under working groups because under Ohio law, committees have to be formed by the board of directors. So we would likely suggest that at the next board meeting, you officially establish these committees, and then we can, one of the standing committees being the grant making committee, and we can start the process of I'll be honest, there's a lot of, Jessica's on the line. We have to make sure that we're upholding the spirit and intent of the parties to the MOU, but also remaining compliant with tax law. And so I think we're just being very thoughtful about the process that we propose for you for consideration. Jessica, do you have anything else to add?
No, that sums it up perfectly.
And kudos to you for that. Yes.
But we are more than willing to take volunteers now. Shoot us an email. I know that we have a list of individuals that would like to be involved in that process. Tom, thank you. That's awesome. So let us know. Thank you. I know we're over time, so I'll leave it to you.
Thank you.
Are we still anticipating receipt of some initial distribution of settlement funds in the next couple weeks?
So if you're referencing the direct payments to local governments, the last update I got was a couple of weeks ago, and that those would be happening soon. I have, I'm speaking on a panel with the AG's office next week, so I will certainly receive an update from them at that time. Mr. Hanju, I know that you have been emailing me about getting that information. I think we certainly want to serve as a resource to you guys for those, the disbursement of those direct payments as well. They're outside of that 55% that comes to the foundation, but we want to be helpful. So I'm working on a process whereby we can be looped into the AG's regular updates to the local governments, and then find a way of communicating that back to you guys.
So Holly, just a quick update. CCAO sent out communications on Monday in regards to the payments. They are going out now. I know our office here has, we are in the process of establishing the fund to receipt those into. So they are in process.
Okay, perfect. I'll touch base. I think Rachel from CCAO, she's been the lead on that. We've communicated throughout this process, so I'll touch base with her as well. She's been very helpful.
Great. All right. Any other discussion? Any other questions? All right. Well, our next meeting is August 10th at 12 p.m. at the County Commissioners Association of Ohio, where we met last time. We hope to see everybody in person at that meeting. And I appreciate all your time and effort in getting this up and running. And I hope everybody has a very blessed day. And thank you to Benish and the team for continuing to move us forward. You are greatly appreciated.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.